The noon sky over Nidus Prime went glassy, then wrote its own algebra. 1,000 slender shadows bled out of a private gate in concentric shells, each hull the color of night, absorbent, almost theoretical. The Triarch Spire's defense lattice flared a warning amber. Traffic lanes froze. Traders in the high atmosphere saw their navigation plots bloom with Terran call signs indexed to nothing the registry recognized. On the assembly floor, voices stacked and broke. The amphitheater was a spiral of lighted tiers, every species arranged by seniority and stubbornness. At the central dais, Archon Velzar lifted one elegant hand and the roar thinned as if throttled. His crest plates caught the chamber's pale sun. "Clerks," Vel said, smooth as warmed glass. "Enter for the record. Earth has arrived without filing an approach petition and is therefore in violation of Charter Sections 2 through 5, inclusive." "Noted," answered the speaker, who looked as if he wanted to bolt anyway. A face appeared across every panel, column, and inset screen, a human woman with steady eyes, brown skin, flight-cut hair, and a uniform stripped of ornament. The name block read, Admiral Amina Rafiq, Terran Advance Flotilla. "Assembly of the Galaxy," she said. "We apologize for our absence. We were occupied with ovens, hospitals, and keeping winters short. We are now prepared to participate." Vel adopted a genial smile, the kind predators wore when they already had a jaw around something soft. "Admiral Rafiq, your polity has ignored 112 lawful summons. The docket reflects a vote to classify Earth as a Class 3 protectorate. Please surrender your gates and disarm for review." Amina's answer came like a scalpel. Charter Clause 8, Security by Demonstration. Any polity that guarantees corridor safety for 90 days may table reforms before a protectorate vote. Terra will secure the breach frontier, starting now. The room reacted like a struck nerve. Clause 8 had dust on it. No one invoked it because it required competence and receipts. Amina lifted 2 fingers. On orbit, Terran ships altered geometry. From the outer shell, carriers peeled open like quiet flowers, exposing hangars. Cylinders unlatched and drifted toward pre-designated coordinates. Grain blocks, medpods, clean water rigs, each tagged with public destination codes. Relief depots ignited with soft beacons around Nidus, and a neutral corridor drew itself between the Terran shells in a precise, generous arc. On the flagship chorus, bridge lights held to working brightness, no theater, just crisp daylight. Officers spoke and clipped confirmations that doubled as records. "Signal traffic stabilized," said Lieutenant Isol Park, head of intelligence. "Public channels are folding our feed cleanly. Privateers at vectors 9 and 11 are feigning course errors. Let them finish their performance," Amina said. Her voice wasn't cold. It was careful. She had learned in disaster zones to build sentences you could live inside. A comms petty officer raised a hand. "Assembly mediation link is live. Put me through." The speaker returned, sweat shining at the hairline. "Admiral, the hegemonic Concord has requested emergency sanctions. And Terra requests the floor to present a security plan and the first pallets of aid," Amina said. "We will also submit a schedule for escort rotations and a legal framework for independent audits." Vel's smile sharpened. "You arrive late and presume to set the agenda." "We arrived with food," Amina said. "And a corridor you have not managed to keep safe." The first shot came from the direction of Vector 11, dressed as an accidental discharge. A privateer wing rolled toward the new corridor, their fire control nets humming with counterfeit jitters. In the spire, half the chamber leaned forward, the other half reached for crisis talking points. "Intercept," Amina said very softly. 3 Terran frigates slid into the path like feathers through water. Their muon lances flickered, a color most eyes guessed more than saw. No explosions, no blossoms of vented plasma. The privateer's power trees simply drooped into safe mode, drives humming down to a patient idle. Tractor fields engaged with medical gentleness. Disabled attackers drifted aside like toys set out of reach of a child. The assembly's sound came back in a lurch. "Broadcast legal logs," Amina said. Park nodded. Already on open bands. Telemetry, weapons telemetry, target telemetry. All time-stamped, externalized, and mirrored to independent nodes. Amina let herself breathe once. The doctrine held, shield first, scalpel second, hammer never if a wrench would do. She had written that on a whiteboard during a flood year when the only thing she commanded was a battered tilt jet and a crew of volunteers who never slept long enough. On a side screen, humanitarian drops multiplied around Nidus orbit, pale cylinders blooming parachutes over designated airfields. Relief crews on the ground filmed with shaking hands, glare flaring their lenses. The feed filled with the small human things that cut through math, a child lifting a medpod lid, a cook tapping a grain block and laughing that it sounded like a drum. Admiral, Park said, Concord media arms are spinning you as a warlord. That's because we have ships. Amina kept her eyes on the corridor, ships and shells, lanes kept clean, a pattern repeated until it taught. They'll need a different story once the food hits kitchens. Vel raised a hand again in the spire. While we appreciate charity, the charter is not a market stall. The vote proceeds. Speaker, Amina said. Terra invokes Clause 8. We will secure the breach and table reforms that end coercive protectorates. We submit operational logs now and request an emergency session tomorrow to present the breach ledger. The docket is full, Vel purred. The speaker, cornered by two powers and his own fear, glanced at a parliamentary aide. The aide, perhaps deciding history would remember his face, cleared his throat. The docket is adjustable. Vel's crest plates flattened by a degree. Security will review that decision. On chorus, an alert chimed, not the toothy kind, the thin kind that sounded like a mosquito near your ear. Park frowned. Odd. A deep space ghost ping just brushed our breach sweep. Low entropy, ancient checksum. It's a distress packet. Origin? Amina felt the first drop in her stomach, and told herself it was nothing. Old space through old trash all the time. Grid D19. Timestamp puts it 11 years back, but relativity and dust lanes could explain the delay. Park's voice gentled. Signature overlay is Admiral, it matches the last beacon from Captain Cameron Rafiq. Her brother's name arrived with no fanfare and all of it at once. Amina's mouth went dry. She remembered his last message, grainy, grinning, insisting the breach would be a quick escort job and then they'd finally eat curry in peace with more cumin than reason. Can we triangulate? She asked. Not precisely at this range. We can bound a volume. We'll need a close sweep. Amina nodded. Quietly. And keep it compartmented. Park hesitated. Understood. Amina let the bridge noise fill the space where memory wanted to talk. She watched Terran ships continue their choreography, escorts slotting into new positions with the economy of ballet, carriers unfolding modular decks into logistics spines, hospital barges calibrating airlocks to alien pressure norms. Comms, she said. Open channel, public. 1,000 ship transceivers interpreted the order and braided one voice out of them. This is Admiral Amina Rafiq of the Terran Pact to all vessels in Nidus orbit. Terra recognizes the Assembly's authority to deliberate, but we will not surrender our gates. We are here to secure a corridor, deliver aid, and present evidence tomorrow that the breach war was engineered for profit. We will submit ourselves to independent audits and we will broadcast our operations live to all. If you fire on aid, we will disable you non-lethally, log it, and tow you clear. If you need food or medicine, say so. The channel populated with 1,000 bad faith messages and a handful of real ones that mattered. A freighter captain near tears. A hospital administrator with lists. A small voice from a reef habitat asking if medicine for salt cough was something ships gave. It is, Amina said, and nodded at her logistics chief. Pallets were redirected with 3 keystrokes and a flurry of drones. On the assembly floor, Vel adjusted his smile, but the eyes behind it were measuring the space between gambits. Admiral, he said, you speak as if you own the corridors. No, Amina said. We speak as if we own our promises. The speaker found his spine. Emergency session approved for tomorrow's first bell. Terra will present. The Concord will reply. The Assembly will vote. Thank you, Amina said. She allowed herself a single exhale that did not sound like relief. As Chorus rotated to present a docking spine to Nidus med shuttles, the spire suffered a flicker, lights dimmed, pressure seals whispered, the building's bones sighed. In a secure feed, a maintenance log stuttered and reset itself twice, which was once too many for chance. Park didn't look up from her console. We're seeing sabotage prep in the spire's fusion dampers, nothing blown yet, just someone laying matches near kindling. With your team's bandwidth? Amina asked. We can stabilize from here if they try it. Quietly, Amina said again. Everything we do is a mirror. Bridge protocol moved like a metronome. Orders were repeated, executed, logged, mirrored to public nodes. The first med shuttle bumped gently into the docking cradle, then the second, then a string like beads. The aid crews moved with the hushed urgency of people who had seen scarcity turned back by trucks and hands. Amina let herself look, for 3 heartbeats, at the breach coordinates pulsing in a corner of her vision. She pressed her thumb to the console and recorded a private note. Cameron, if you're ash in math, I will still make the ledger land. If you're not, hold a little longer. Asterisk asterisk. The corridor held. The privateers drifted, chastened and intact. The assembly set a time. The 1,000 ships tightened their shells and dimmed their running lights to the city's noon. Bridge, Amina said. This is the part where we sleep 4 hours and pretend we're fresh. Park, keep the breach volume warming in the background. Logistics, bias aid to the reef habitats and the low-grav clinics. Comms, cut through the smear with kitchens and blood. Tomorrow we make the case. Tonight we behave like what we say we are. A shield, Park said, not quite a question. A promise, Amina said. The chamber of the Triarch spire smelled faintly of ozone and worry. Delegates shuffled datapads, some whispering about the aid shipments already reaching their colonies. Others leaned toward Archon Velzar, who lounged in his crescent chair as if nothing could disturb the architecture of his certainty. Admiral Amina Rafiq watched from the secure hololink, arms crossed, a soldier forced into the language of law. Hashtag the courier's vault. On chorus, Lieutenant Isol Park stood over a black capsule no larger than her hand. It had been seized hours earlier when Terran escorts intercepted a Concord courier, wandering too close to the aid lanes. The capsule was a cipher core, impossibly dense, encryption keyed to vanish at tampering. Park's fingers moved with surgical care. Admiral, we've got a cascade entry point, she said. The Concord is sloppy when they think no one's listening. Amina leaned over her shoulder. She had flown medevacs with Park during storms where radios failed and people drowned by the dozen. If Park said there was a door, there was. Text scrolled, sharp and bureaucratic. Tsar Institute Policy Draft, Crisis Sustainment as Revenue Model. The words landed like ice. Park's jaw clenched. They built wars to rent protection. Engineered instability. The breach wasn't a failure of control, it was the business plan. Package it, Amina said. We'll present it tomorrow. Full redundancy, mirrored to public nodes. No one buries this again. Hashtag voices from the frontier. Before the session, Amina insisted on a broadcast. Not to the assembly, but to the neglected worlds that bled tribute into Concord accounts. Kesh appeared first, an elder with mineral dust still in her hair. We paid for shields that never covered our skies. My sons smelted ore for their ships. When raiders came, only the graves were guarded. Run followed, scales dulled by years of malnutrition. We drowned in levees. They called it protection from pirates. The pirates wore Concord tags. Then Tef, ice hauler, voice trembling. We begged for medicines. They gave us debt. The hollow carried more weight than fleet tonnage. Amina let the silence after each testimony sit long enough to bruise. When she spoke, she kept her tone measured. Terra asked for no tribute. We brought planetary fabrication pods as escrow. They are yours regardless of how tomorrow's vote falls. We want recognition only, and an end to coercion. Relief spread across the channel, laughter, sobs, simple disbelief. Amina felt the swell of something heavier than pride. It was responsibility woven tighter by every word spoken into that feed. ##### sabotage and the spire. The following morning, the Assembly's great chamber never opened. Instead, alarms bleated. A fusion damper fault threatened to vent the chamber into vacuum. Delegates scrambled for pressure hoods. Technicians swore at consoles that refused to stabilize. On chorus, Park caught the pattern first. That's not a fault. Someone is pushing a recursive loop. They're staging an evacuation to delay your presentation. Options? Amina asked. Remote override. Risky. We might trip the failsafes. Do it. Park's hands moved with precision born of sleepless years. Terran tugs near orbit beamed stabilizing fields into the spire's core, cutting the feedback loop. Power lines steadied, alarms guttered, and the chamber's pressure normalized. Delegates slumped in their seats, alive and unsettled. Vel rose with perfect composure. How fortunate! A human fleet hovering in orbit, and suddenly our chamber nearly vents. I wonder, Admiral, what story the Assembly will tell of this coincidence. Amina met his gaze through the hololink. The story with logs, Archon. Every action, every what, every stabilizer pulse was mirrored to neutral nodes. Tell whichever story you like. The truth will outlast it. #### the midpoint decision. Later, in her quarters, Amina studied the breach telemetry again. The ghost packet still pulsed in the corner of her console, a brother's signature clawing its way through time and dust. She had carried grief so long it had fossilized, and now it cracked under the possibility he might not be Bones after all. Park entered exhausted but sharp. We've bracketed the origin of that distress packet. Probability map points to a Concord black site. Survivors could still be held there. Or corpses stored for leverage, Amina said. Do we act? Park asked. Amina let the silence hold. She could already hear the argument in her head. Move now, risk escalation, wait, and the Concord wipes the site before evidence can be taken. She spoke slowly. We take it. Limited op minimal signature, no kill shots. We retrieve proof, and whoever's left. Broadcast the attempt so Vel can't paint it as aggression. Park hesitated. And if it is Cameron? Then I don't command this mission for him. I command it for every voice that testified today. If he's alive, that's the echo. #### the operation. The strike unfolded at the breach's edge, where wreckage fields rolled in slow ballet. A Terran corvette squadron ghosted through the dust, running cold. The black site floated inside a crack station husk, Concord beacons disguised as independent mercenary tags. Approach vector locked, the corvette captain whispered. Target defenses minimal, half-frozen turrets, low patrol count. Amina's order traveled across encrypted light. Disable, don't destroy. Every hull intact. Every action mirrored. Muon lances flicked. Turrets powered down like lamps snuffed in a row. Patrol craft spasmed into safe shutdown, engines sighing into silence. Boarding drones cut with surgical lines, peeling back hatches without fire. Inside, prisoners blinked against unexpected light. Some were skeletal, some too weak to stand, but all alive. Among them, evidence caches, data crystals bearing the same Institute logo as the courier capsule. Park's voice cracked the bridge air. We've got them. Survivors and proof. Amina closed her eyes. She didn't ask if her brother was among them. Not yet. #### spin and counter spin. As the Terran strike concluded, Concord media filled the assembly feeds. Terran aggression in breach sector. Images of drifting hulls were spun as massacres. Vel's voice dripped with triumph. But then the Terran live broadcast hit. Footage of muon lances disabling without killing, of prisoners stumbling free, of evidence files tagged with Concord seals. The story rewrote itself in minutes. Delegates whispered furiously. Some stood and shouted for inquiry. Others avoided Vel's gaze. Amina addressed the assembly directly. We have retrieved survivors. We have recovered documents proving the Concord engineered the breach crisis for profit. Tomorrow, we lay the full ledger before you. Decide as you wish, but you will not decide in ignorance. #### closing beat. When the session adjourned, the assembly hall throbbed with unease. The vote loomed, knives unsheathed on every tier. Vel withdrew to his alcove, smiling still, but his eyes betrayed calculation, not control. On chorus, Amina stood alone at the viewport. The 1,000 ships held formation, silent, vigilant, their lights dimmed to match Nidus's dusk. She pressed her palm against the glass. Cameron, she whispered, if you walk out of that site tomorrow, I'll hear you then. Until that moment, I fight for every world they left voiceless. And the Terran Armada kept watch, a promise etched in steel and light. Dawn over Nidus Prime arrived like a hell breath. The Triarch spire glittered, the chamber packed, and above it 1,000 Terran hulls waited in silent shells. Admiral Amina Rafiq stood in a plain holoframe. Behind her, Chorus displayed only work, status bands, relief tallies, escort rotations. She served the moment. Madam Speaker, she said, the Terran Pact presents the breach ledger. Lieutenant Iso Park replaced her. No music. Documents stamped Tsar Institute filled the air, policy drafts, invoices, models where crisis sustainment, maximized revenue. Each file mirrored live to neutral archives. Park's summary was surgical. The Concord engineered instability along frontier routes to justify permanent levies. The breach escalation follows their plan. Here are the graphs. Here are the signatures. The chamber tilted toward a different center. Some delegates stared at their shoes. Others stared at Archon Velzar. Amina returned. We also recovered survivors from Grid D-19. Testimonies are sworn and attached. Concord technicians named superiors. She didn't look toward the secondary feed where evacuation blankets framed thin faces. One face could break her composure. She would not let it. Vel rose, wounded dignity arranged like armor. A fleet arrives in violation of protocol, kidnaps personnel from a licensed site, and floods the nets with forged defamation. I move for defensive interdiction, Protocol 17. Seize the illegal gates. Detain the Terran Admiral. The speaker glanced to the clerks. Motion acknowledged. Debate limited to 6 minutes. Amina's mic stayed open. She said nothing. The public relay instead showed Terran convoys landing in quiet arcs, med wards opening, kitchens steaming. Somewhere, a child laughed off-screen. Heads turned. Vel spread his hands. Benevolence as veil. Weapons under every plate. Amina said. Log my next words to every archive. Terran weapons remain cold unless attacked. But if interdiction forces move on our gate tethers, we will act under Clause 8 to preserve the corridor. Our response will be non-lethal, recorded, reviewable. Names attached. The vote lights began to flicker, green, amber, red. On tactical, Park quietly raised 2 fingers. Concord cruisers are vectoring toward our anchors, she said on the private loop. Weapons warming. They expect the motion to pass before they arrive. Metronome, Amina said. Across the shells, escorts acknowledged. No banners. Just a choreography practiced until it replaced fear with habit. The first pulse trembled the spire's windows. Muon lances cooled hostile reactors to safe thresholds, tripping failovers like a hand on a fevered brow. Kinetic rails locked inside inertial sheaths, rounds frozen a finger's width from their first shove. Point defense webs fluttered then stilled. Each event carried a legal citation and a timestamp burned into public memory. Vel's image jittered. This is an attack. No hull breaches. No casualties, Park said on the open channel. Telemetry mirrored to neutrals. Recommend crews stand down, drink water, and reconsider pensions. Laughs cracked the tension. Concord ships drifted. Terran tugs nudged them out of the corridor. Amina did not smile. Proceed with your vote, she told the assembly. If interdiction passes, you will still need ships to enforce it. Those ships just learned they can't punch a kitchen apart today. Then the reveal, earlier than planned but necessary. Half the Terran warships unfurled into what they were: hospital decks, classrooms, hydroponic spines. Armor peeled back to show purpose. Cargo bays rolled out modular shelters like loaves from an oven. The other half held station, escorts, and refusal. Amina said, "We built vessels that could survive war and chose to make them carry futures." On a side feed, survivors from D-19 entered a med bay. A man stepped through a curtain, shorter, thinner, eyes too large, but with the same tilt to his mouth before a bad joke. Captain Cameron Rafiq. He handed over detainee tags like a chore finally finished. Park widened Amina's private window. He looked up, startled, then smiled with a gratitude that cracked her kept surface. She tapped the console once, an old code between siblings, later. Work first, ***. She faced the assembly. You have the ledger. You have living witnesses. You have a corridor safer than it has been in years. Vote. The board tallied. Lights blinked, steadied. The speaker swallowed. By a margin of 11, the Cease Predation Compact passes. Coercive protectorates are suspended pending review. Independent audits begin at once. Terran sovereignty is recognized. The interdiction motion fails. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the room exhaled. Some delegates cheered. Some wept. Some glared at Vel as if finally seeing the bill they had charged to other people's children. Vel did not shout. He turned and walked out, crest plates flat, guards tight, already calculating a refuge. Tomorrow's work waited outside the chamber. Amina closed the link and, for the first time since decanting, left the bridge. The med bays smelled like clean plastic and broth. Cameron sat on a cot with a cup held in both hands as though warmth were a new technology. He stood, then wobbled. She reached him in 2 steps. They didn't crush each other. They practiced the smaller art of staying upright. You took your time, he said, voice sanded thin. We had winters to shorten, she answered, letting the corners of her mouth lift. He nodded toward the hull. They saw the math today. Enough of it, she said. The rest we'll teach with kitchens. Amina rose. I have to brief the frontier delegations and lock audit teams. Go write the next meeting, he said. She squeezed his shoulder, then returned to the corridor. The 1,000 ships dimmed their running lights in sequence until they throbbed at the slow pace of a child's heartbeat from Runreef. Across Nidus, people looked up, realized they were being matched rather than ruled, and smiled without being told to. Relief ships kept landing, steady as rain across a thirsty plain today still. The galaxy, off balance, found a new rhythm. Earth, late to every invitation, had arrived exactly when it meant to, with ovens, with hospitals, with a ledger and a choice.